Well, thank you. Well, alrighty. Welcome to the Federal Lands Access Program webinar for federal land managers. Just a really quick intro from me. So my name is Andrew Valdez, and I'm a planner with Central Federal Lands, but I do come from a land management background. So I'm familiar with the challenges you all face out there in the field every day. So us here at Central, like, we're here to help you achieve your land management objectives. It's why we exist. I'm happy to be your resource for this call and anything that may come up in the future. So with that said, I do have just a few housekeeping items before we kind of jump in here. This meeting is being recorded, so if you don't want your name and face out there in the public domain, feel free to stay off camera or follow up with me afterwards if you have any questions. Second, this webinar is mostly geared for you guys as the land managers. So that just means I'm going to spend less time like talking through all the elements of the main application document and more time talking about like your role in the process as the agency that's going to be like impacted by any proposed projects. I scheduled a webinar for next week for prospective applicants. It's definitely not necessary for anyone on this call to join that one as well, unless you just can't get enough of me and the access program. We've slotted 3 hours for today. I've got about 30 slides to go through. So the presentation itself is probably going to be about an hour long, and then we've got plenty of time for Q&A after I'm done. So with that said, we'll hop in here. So here's our general outline for today. This may be review for some of you, but for others, this could be like totally brand new information. So I'm going to cover like federal lands, highways, and the access program like A to Z. And then we'll also touch on the parts of the application process that you guys need to be familiar with as the land managers. And then, like I said, we'll just have some general housekeeping and then open up the floor for Q&A. There are also some key points to look out for that you'll see with the yellow notification there. So federal lands, highways. So basically, we're the Department of Transportation for you all in the federal land management world. As I'm sure many of you are aware, a third of the United States is federal lands, and stewardship of the transportation systems on those lands falls under our purview. That's our responsibility. We're really like the last vestige of the Federal Highway Administration that functions like this, like a DOT, and that we plan, design, and build all of our projects or most of our projects. The rest of federal highways is under the federal aid system, which you may have heard of, in which funding goes to the individual states. And then federal highways has a stewardship and oversight role with the DOTs and other local partners. So that's, just tried to capture it in our mission statement here that I'm not going to read. And this is sort of where Central Federal Lands sort of sits within the broader Department of Transportation, right? So we're a division office of federal lands, highways, and you can see the different land management logos there. And this just shows the three divisions that we're situated here in Lakewood, Colorado. That's our territory. And the federal lands are sort of coded there in green. So you can see we've got a pretty big chunk of the federal lands across the country. And these are our core capital programs. Today we're mostly going to be talking about the Federal Lands Transportation Program and the Federal Lands Access Program. They're kind of two sides of the same coin. And these two programs were really established to address access to and through federal lands. And in an ideal world, these programs complement and support each other. And we'll get into that angle a little bit later. But the easiest way to think about these is FLTP is federally owned, and FLAP is non-federally owned, but provides access to publicly accessible federal lands. So FLAP projects are programmed through a call for projects, which will be opening for South Dakota on September 15th. And the owner of the facility, or the agency that like maintains the facility, has to submit the application. So typically this is like a state DOT or other local government agency, like a city or a town. And then we also do have programs for US federally recognized tribes and emergency federal relief, the Tribal Transportation Program and IRFO. Just a little bit about Central. As I showed you from the map, we've got 14 states, including Hawaii and some Pacific territories. And we're not just about moving people from A to B, right? Our federal lands are the national treasures. And the built infrastructure needs to take into account things like, visitor experience, resource conservation, and we are really at the forefront of designing and delivering projects like that. As I mentioned before, we provide cradle to grave services in these complex and sensitive environments, and partnerships are really what make good projects. So we love to see multiple agencies coming together to propose a project. This helps leverage our limited program dollars and address projects of mutual need. Once a project is awarded, there's a single point of contact in the project manager. So nobody has to navigate like our Byzantine federal bureaucracy to get information. And as I said earlier, we're here to serve the land management agencies and help you achieve your land management objectives, whatever they may be. So this is a little background on the access program, or again, the FLAP. It is authorized by Congress in national transportation legislation. So this was first done in MAP 21, and it's been continued through every reauthorization through the current one, which is called the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, or bill. And you may have also heard of the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, or EJA. These two are the same thing, so don't be confused there. Bill authorized around $300 million per year of its life for the access program, and these are usually multi-year bills. So 2022 through 2026 is sort of the lifetime of the bipartisan infrastructure law, and we hope that Congress will reauthorize FLAP in the next transportation bill. And again, its purpose is to improve transportation facilities that provide access to or adjacent to or located within federal lands, with an emphasis on high use recreation sites and other federal economic generators. That's actually like in the legislation, and I'll speak a little bit to that a little bit later. So FLAP funding is allocated by legislative formula, which was sort of set in MAP 21 and hasn't changed since then. The formula hasn't changed since then. But essentially, it's a function of percentage of federal lands within a state and federal public roadway mileage by state. And this is sort of how the funding shakes out on a national basis. unsurprisingly, Western states are heavily favored in this program. And South Dakota comes in 23rd with 5.4% of the federal landmass. And that gives you an annual allocation of $1.2 million a year. Frankly, that's not a lot of money in the transportation world, and I wish we had more. But if we're talking things like, unpaved roads, natural surface trails and trailheads, planning projects, that funding does start to go a little bit farther. The bipartisan infrastructure law did remove the local match requirement, but this is what the local requirements used to be for matching funds. So South Dakota local partners would have to come with 18% of project funds. This also puts pressure on limited program dollars. However, there are instances where it may make sense for a local agency to want to fund a portion or a majority of a project with federal aid dollars, and then just use FLAP as a supplementary funding source. And then they also get to leverage our design and project delivery expertise. That's not a totally uncommon scenario, and of course helps us expand the program in any one state. And this is just a rundown of eligible leverage funding sources. Federal aid, like I mentioned, FLTP also counts. Programming decisions for the FLTP are handled by the land management agencies, and each one does it like a little bit differently. Typically, it's through a call for projects at the regional or national levels. So I'd advise you to consult with your regional or district management to see if there are some projects in the pipeline for your unit. But for example, if one of you is aware of an FLTP project, but the need actually extends beyond, your unit boundaries, it would make sense to bundle those projects into one package for us to design and deliver. And there's significant savings when we can do projects like that. And just to note, we can't receive like private or like nonprofit funding directly, but a local agency could be a pass-through for funds like that for leverage. And here's a little bit more on FLAP FLTP leverage. So the project decision committee, or PDC, have to concur on the project, and I'll get into a little bit more on what the PDC is later. But the projects have to be contiguous, and the project has to be managed as sort of one delivery package. So then we can realize those economies of scale. And the PDC may also require the local agency to contribute some funding, and that's just to ensure we're not absorbing all the project risk. But this would be done sort of on a case-by-case basis. This is just a graphic example of how a joint FLTP, FLAP project could work. So say we have a $1 million flat project to improve a county road to the entrance of a national forest. And separately, there's an FLTP project to improve the scenic drive to the parking area. Those projects could be combined into one FLAP application. So the applicant potentially has no or low cost burden. They would have us, Central Federal Lands, to deliver the project instead of them, which frees up their, administrative burden. And then they get to claim, an overmatch of leverage funds on the application. And this is also great for us because it'll be far cheaper to deliver one larger project than to try and mobilize for two smaller projects. So my ask to you FLMA folks is, again, get with your area or regional management to see if there are any possibilities like this in the mix. This is just more as an FYI for you guys. Typically, Central Federal Lands will deliver and lead selected projects. And the applicant will kind of indicate this on the application itself. And that's just because this is our business model, our niche. This is why, again, we exist. There are some exceptions to this, but they're pretty rare. Again, this is mainly just as an FYI to you guys. So who makes the programming decisions? Each state has a programming decisions committee, or PDC. This is a 3-person volunteer board that's established by something like a charter, and made up of a state DOT rep, a local government rep, and then us as Federal Highways also has 1 seat. And you can see the PDC responsibilities there, but essentially it's their task to ensure proper stewardship of the program from a statewide perspective. It's not their job to advocate for special projects in their districts or anything like that. And sometimes even members will recuse themselves from scoring a particular application because there could be a real or even perceived conflict or something like that. Now, what you don't see here is FLMA representation on the PDC. That's by design. So each state has an FLMA technical advisory group, or TAG. And I think actually some TAG members are on this call today. These are typically FLMA reps from the regional or national levels, and they advise the PDC, but they don't participate in programming decisions. Unfortunately, transportation funding is zero sum, and as much as we'd like to do all the projects, we don't have that kind of money, and we don't want deadlock in the PDCs. So in this case, we have to defer to the agencies that own and maintain the facilities. That being said, input and feedback from the tags is hugely important. So the FLMA roles do play a critical role in deliberations and the decision-making process. All right, so now we're going to talk eligibility. So per legislation, any public highway, road, bridge, trail, or transit system located on or adjacent to federal lands. This includes rehabilitation, restoration, construction, reconstruction, engineering, environmental compliance, operation and maintenance of transit facilities, and planning and research. But for FLAP, title and maintenance responsibility must be vested with the state, county, or local government or tribal government. And because these are the agencies that would be the applicants. There were some changes to the access program under the bipartisan infrastructure law. As I mentioned before, there is no more local match requirement, but as I've said, it can help in certain situations. And there's expanded eligibility for context-sensitive solutions. So these are projects that preserve scenic, aesthetic, historic, or environmental resources. So think of something like a raised boardwalk over a wetland, for example. There's also eligibility for signage, wayfinding, landscaping, and other visual mitigations. Typically, we'll want to see a primary transportation component to a project. We wouldn't want to do just like a signage project or just an interpretation project. But all of those other project elements can now be combined into one project package, and all of that is eligible. So here are some common eligibility scenarios. At the top there, we have a road or facility that starts outside the federal land and ends inside the federal land. that like blue segment you see there. That's eligible with a maintenance agreement where like the local agency agrees to manage that segment of roadway or trail. And we have templates that we can provide for those maintenance agreements. The second one down is sort of the most straightforward scenario. You have a road or facility that starts outside the federal land and ends at like the federal land boundary at like the contact station or visitor center or something like that. Or you can have a road or facility that starts outside the federal land and ends short of the federal land. We typically wouldn't want to see anything farther than like 10 miles away from the boundary. But if it's leading to and providing access to a unit, it would be eligible. Tribal roads maintained by a tribal unit are eligible, but the roadway must also access federal lands other than the tribe. Tribal lands aren't eligible as the standalone destination for the program. We do have that tribal transportation program that I mentioned earlier. That's what serves that need. And then finally, land leased by the federal government, not eligible. This is another scenario that we see sometimes, and I think it may be applicable here in South Dakota. You can have a state park surrounding a reservoir that's managed by like the Army Corps of Engineers or the Bureau of Reclamation. Roads or even like other like boating docks, transportation facilities leading to the water that are within the park but that are not federally maintained would be eligible. And that's another great opportunity for leveraged funds to be proposed in an application. So if the state park is already planning some improvements to a site, for example, that could be a great leverage opportunity. So moving on to preferred projects, as I mentioned before in the legislation, preference is given to transportation facilities that provide access to federal high-use recreation sites and economic generators. Federal recreation is defined as any site used by the public to recreate on federal lands. So public use is a key component there. And high use is defined sort of as by a region or area and not compared to like across the state or country, right? Like not every county has a Mount Rushmore, for example. And federal economic generators are defined as any use on or of federal lands that increases aggregate investment or economic activity for a local community and or region. So, think ski areas, energy production, sites that have, say, a regional or national draw that pull people in. People are spending, tourism dollars in an area from outside an area. Those would be economic generators. And these are the elements that make up a strong application. So we typically want to see things like full reconstruction or rehabilitation of a roadway, anything that expands modal access to a federal land unit, like a new bike lane or a new multi-use path, wholesale bridge replacements. A lot of this, quite honestly, is a judgment call. But if we see a reasonable scope, reasonable project estimate, good coordination with the FLMAs and support, and the project meets the FLAP vision, that's going to be a pretty strong project. We typically don't like to do maintenance only projects. The purpose of the program is to expand access and not like fix a county's deferred maintenance backlog. similar with any competitive process, right? Like unclear or poorly written applications don't fare so well. So if you as a land manager are working with the county on an application, it certainly helps to provide them with as much context as possible, photos, maps, whatever they may need, to be able to clearly communicate the purpose and need of the project will be helpful. Of course, the project needs to meet the basic criteria, the basic eligibility criteria. And there's a bit of a nuance here. So sometimes we see applications that seem more like urban or rural commuter routes or neighborhood streets. And the federal lands access component is only maybe 10% of traffic, daily traffic. That's okay. But in scenarios like that, I think the PDC would want to see commensurate matching funds, since the access component is secondary to like another kind of purpose, another transportation purpose. All right, so this is where we'll be going into, this is where we would be going into the application process page by page. But since you will only be filling out the FLMA support form, that's all we have to cover here. If you haven't seen, this is what the main FLAP landing page looks like. If you go to that URL there at the top, that's where you'll see like the most up-to-date FLAP information, as well as all of the application materials. And you can click on your state and get that info, or just send me an email. Generally, a call for projects is open for about 90 days. And we try to schedule calls every 3 to 4 years, although inflation is somewhat changing that calculus for us. So this is what you guys will see on the FLMA side. This is the FLMA support form, and it's just one page, so not to owners for you guys. The only trick here is that if a project does apply to more than one agency, we would want to see each agency to fill out a form. Everything else is pretty straightforward, but box 11 there is where the PDC will see how applicants coordinated with you all in developing the project and scope. Is this a bridge to nowhere, or is this something that really helps out the FLMA? And there's also a box in here, box 12, to indicate if FLTP funds will be used anywhere near the proposed FLAP project. So also a pretty critical element there. So selection process, as I mentioned, we shoot for a call every 3 to 4 years, and the application window will be open for 90 days. I'll show a timeline here in a minute. And then we'll typically go to a project shortlist. If there are a handful of projects that look pretty strong, that's sort of at the discretion of the PDC. And then Central Federal Lands project team will conduct preliminary engineering and identify any major project risks or contingencies, make sure the scope, is within the rough order of magnitude in the application process. Next, the PDC will deliberate and determine the final program of projects, and then CFL will deliver the project cradle to grave. And this includes any like environmental or NEPA compliance, right-of-way, or like real estate acquisition stuff, utility issues. We do all of that. And here is our timeline for South Dakota. So again, as I said, we'll have a 90-day opening on the call for projects. We'll open on September 15th and close December 15th. we're targeting to have our deliberative process with the PDC and the tag complete by spring of 2024. We should have our shortlist and scoping effort complete sometime in the spring summer timeframe of 2024, and that's kind of dependent on weather. And a final program of projects by the summer of that year. As far as like, you know, design and construction and delivery, the projects themselves will drive that process. So TBD there. All right, and finally, just to wrap up here, you made it. Just a couple of FYI items. Really, all you need to know here is that we have, you know, performance metrics. We have an obligation target of 95% or more of funds. We want to get these dollars out the door and on the ground. So we do have the authority to do loan borrow between states. This gives us some flexibility to try and program as many strong projects as possible. So I guess the point being there is that if you have a really, really good project and even if it seems big, just get it in the hopper, and you know, at least it's on our radar. I will be your FLAP point of contact for this call until the application process is complete, at which point Jill Locken from programming will take over. But of course, you can always reach out to me if you have any questions once we're in the programming phase. So really the last thing I want to say here in closing, if you guys know of a good project, you know, reach out to your local government, you know, the county, you know, public works folks, or, you know, if you're in an urbanized area, the MPO or municipality, and pitch them and say, hey guys, you know, we have this need. We can't be the applicant here, but this looks like a really good project. A lot of times what we're seeing across the country is that coordination is just not happening organically, and the people who manage the federal aid dollars don't have good visibility into the needs of the land managers. So get on their radar and say, hey, we've got this, you know, road, we've got this trailhead, we've got a trail project that needs attention. Could you help us out here? They'll you know, typically be willing to talk to you about good projects. So so really that wraps up sort of my presentation here. We're only you know, 34 minutes into our meeting, and I'm happy to stay as long as you guys need to answer questions. So thank you for your patience and listening. I will also be posting, so the recording of this and the slide deck will both be on the South Dakota FLAP webpage. Let's see here. Thomas Farrell's got his hand up. Go ahead, Thomas.
How do you get an estimate for the project without going very far into the project?
So we, on the South Dakota FLAP webpage, we've got an estimator template. It is a little engineering heavy, but you should be able to get a sort of a rough order of magnitude for the project just by putting in a couple of inputs. We understand, of course, that these are not you know, down to the wire, to the penny estimates. That's okay. We're just trying to get a general sense on what the project actually looks like. It looks like a good project. Like I said, we're going to go through a scoping process on our own.
Sounds good, thanks.
Yeah. There can't just be one question. Adam Kalisa.
Good afternoon. Here in South Dakota, we have got a lot of folks that would be eligible to apply that have literally miles and miles of road. And the amount of money can't even come close to do any kind of significant improvement that's been listed as the preferred projects, a rebuild or a new surfacing, those kinds of things. What would your advice be on, the state of South Dakota and how we'd want to maybe be able to tackle opening up the law to be able to have the standards be changed to what is acceptable within the program to be done so that we can stretch the dollars farther by doing something that's less than a 3-inch mat, for example?
Right. So that's a good question. One of the other things that the bipartisan infrastructure law did change is they added a ton of discretionary programs. So FLAP is what would be called a formulaic program. Programs are other types of grant opportunities. For what you described there, FLAP is probably not a very good fit, but there are a number of new programs and existing programs under bill that have, some of the programs start at, $100 million and up. So there are other opportunities, and I'd be happy to chat with you a little bit offline to talk about how those might align with the needs. If they're on, particularly if they're on like the state network, there's lots of opportunities to try and put together funding for projects like that. But yeah, for FLAP, that's probably not the kind of not a good fit. Thank you for the question. Anyone else? Don't be shy. Well, going once, going twice. All right, I guess that's it. Well, thank you all so much. This is my first call for projects. So
Andrew?
Yeah, go ahead, Jessica.
Oh, sorry. There's somebody put a question in the chat box.
Oh, state agencies that have lands adjacent to federal lands can apply. Yes, definitely. So state DOT is eligible. So is, like I said, state parks. I don't know. I know there's like a game, fish, and wildlife agency in South Dakota, but I don't know if they actually own any assets or not. Basically, it's a non-federal asset manager can apply. And Shiloh, I'd be happy to talk with you offline if you want to talk about a specific project. Well, alrighty, folks. Well, I have never been to South Dakota, so I am looking forward to getting to know the state a little bit better, if just by reviewing these applications. As I said, my door is open. virtually to you all. So feel free to get on the phone and give me a call or send me an email if you do have any questions. We're looking forward to some fun projects, and really appreciate everyone's time today. So thank you, and looks like we're going to wrap a little bit early. Unless last call, any last questions? All right, hearing none. Well, thanks again, everybody, and keep doing the good work out there. It's very, very good work, working in the service of public lands. So thanks. We'll be in touch. Appreciate it.